Okay everyone, welcome back to lesson 7 of Andy's coding tutorials, Vue.js Beginners Tutorial. Okay, so where we left off last time, we made a form here. If we go back to pull up the code from here, and if we remember, we added some validation to the button here, so this is now disabled, and until we enter at least 3 characters, that's disabled. Then once it's 3 characters, that's enabled, and we can now submit through that. And so if we go back to that code, we run this check name length on the input whenever a key is entered. It runs this check name length function, which checks if the length's greater than 3. So less than 3, it disables it, and we disable it through this button disable. That sets this dot button disabled, which is this one. When the button disable is true, it means this v bind here is disabled. Okay, so that disables the button. That disables the button here. So that still disables it here. Okay, it's based on this boolean here. Okay, so what we're going to do now. So we've learned quite a bit already as we've gone along. We've learned about the V model. We've learned how to bind stuff. We've learned how to check input events, and we've learned a few forms and some buttons and that. And so I think we're ready now to try and make a simple contact form, I guess. And so what we'll do now is we'll say, okay, we want to have a contact form with some validation. And so if the user does not fill in all of the fields, then we want the user to not be able to click the button. And so we're going to learn 1 or 2 more new things, but we're basically putting all of the things we've used up until now into actual practice. So this is something that you would use in a real life web form. So you're going to make a website and you want users to contact you, and so you usually make some kind of contact form. So this is a great example. So now you can use your new Vue knowledge for real life scenarios. Okay, so let's get started. So you don't want this list, so let's get rid of this list and the names. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll get rid of these methods for now. Okay, clear them out, and we'll keep this button disabled for now. We'll get rid of this new name, and we need to remove. Let's just remove this all for now, just to make it easier. Okay, so we know where we're at. Okay, so all right. So we want to make a form. So this is a really simple form. Obviously, we're not putting a lot of design into it. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to make a simple form. Okay, so we need a few inputs. So first thing we want to do is we want to have a label. So let's just do label with an input. Okay, and we just want a text input on this one, so we don't need anything there. And so we need a well, let's do this first name. So we need to get the user's first name. Okay, so we need a value for that. So we need a variable so that we're going to store that. So we go first name here. Okay, and we want to put that in our V model. So remember, we need a V model to tie a variable to an input field. Okay, and so we'll put a line break after that. Oops, okay, now let's do this one again. Let's actually put 2 line breaks after that, just to make it look a bit better. Okay, let's see where we're at now in the browser. Okay, so we've got a first name and just a field there. Make sure the label's working. Okay, that's fine. So first name. Okay, the next thing we want is we want to get their last name. So we'll just copy that. We want another field here called another variable called last name, and we'll make that, of course, an empty string, and we need to change that to last name. Okay, so now we've got that. So what else do we need from the user? We want to know. Okay, so we want to know. They probably want to know their email address. That'd be really good to know. Okay, so let's say email address. Okay, and let's copy that again because we can use the same text form. Email. Okay, email address. And we want to get, for the purpose, we want to say, we'll go into a little bit more detail about the user because we want some more information about them. So let's get their gender. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to get their gender now. So let's go. Okay. We'll use a radio box for that. So okay. So let's get an input. If we've got a radio for that. Okay, great. That's awesome. All right. So we want to call that one. We don't need a name, but we will give it an ID of, let's say, male, and we want another one, female. Okay, and we'll give that. We'll just make sure we give it a value as well. Okay, we'll give it value of male and value of female. Okay, so we've got a radio button. Okay, let's have a look what we've got on the screen now. Okay, and so we've got a first name, last name, email. We haven't put any text on those buttons, so let's just make it easy, and we'll just wrap that in a okay, we'll just, to make it easier here, label. Okay, well, we want that for male. Okay, and we can close that off. Oops, no, we've got one already. Okay, let's put that after. Let's actually put these after the radio boxes, the radio buttons. Okay, and we want to say that's male. Okay, female. Okay, let's see if that looks a bit better now. Alright, so the user can choose either of those. That's not working right. So we need to add a vModel for that now. So we want to do gender. Okay, that's nothing. We'll just make that empty. Okay, and we need to add a vModel for these. So we go vModel equals gender. And we want to use that same vModel on female as well. Okay, let's see if that's working now. Okay, and that's all tied in correctly now, so it's recognized it as one radio list. Okay, and what we'll do now is we want to say, let's put a select box in. Okay, so we need a model for that as well. So we're going to say, would you like to receive email alerts? Okay, so email newsletter. Okay, email. Let's just call that newsletter. Okay, and we want to make that just a string as well, an empty string. Okay, so what we're going to do there is we're going to do a select, and we don't need those name and IDs. Okay, we need to attach that vModel though. Okay, so so that Vue can get the value of this. So we want newsletter, and we'll just make that really simple. So we'll go option, oops, yes, oops, so we'll make that yes, and no, and no. Okay, and let's put a please select in there as well. Okay, option value equals nothing, and we want to say please select, just to make sure that we can have something with a null value. Okay, so we don't automatically choose it for them. Okay, one more thing we want to do is we want to add a checkbox in. Okay, so let's add a one more thing in there. So we'll go, we need a label for that, and we also need a variable. So we've got newsletter, so we want I agree. So we want them to agree to our terms and conditions of privacy or something like that. So let's say we want to make a input checkbox, and we'll call that I agree, and we need to make sure we attach the V model to that. V model equals I agree. Okay, and we need to make sure that that label is for that one. Okay, so I'll just move that around because that's not in the right order. Okay, that's better. There we go. And so this is our contact form, so we probably want to get a message from the user as well. So let's put a multi-line text box in here as well. So there's quite a bit in here, but just bear with me, and we'll get to it. Okay, so we want a text area. Okay, and we don't need those here. We do need to say the size, but I think we can just do 5 lines will be okay for this one. And we actually need some line breaks after here, so let's get some line breaks from here. Okay, line breaks, and we want some line breaks, and we want some more line breaks. One more, and we'll put just a text that says span. We want to say please enter your message. Okay, here, and we need to have a V model for that, so we want to have message there. Okay, alright, so that can be just an empty string, that's okay, and we need to add the V model for that. Okay, so we need to say message. Alright, so let's have a look where we're at now. Okay, so we've got our first name, last name, email, gender, newsletter. We need to have a label for newsletter here, so that looks a bit strange without a label. So let's find newsletter. So we'll just throw an ID on that and call it newsletter, and we'll make a label newsletter. Okay, and we want to call that we want to say sign up for a newsletter. Okay, there we go. We should put a colon in there as well to make it look like the others, otherwise it's a bit weird. Okay, here we go. So we're getting there, and this checkbox doesn't have any text, so we definitely need something there in that label. I agree to the terms and conditions, whatever they may be. Okay, and let's throw that after the input, just to make it the same as the radio buttons. Okay, so they're just so it's on the right hand side instead of the left. Okay, and the last thing we need is a submit button. Okay, so let's get a submit button in here, and we'll just use a button. And we're just gonna, what we'll do is we'll add that disabled here from now. So remember, we have vbind disabled equals button disabled. Now one more trick, like I showed you with the click and the input, where in the click and the input you can do @ when you want to do with vbind, there's a shortcut here, and you just take away the vbind like that, so you have colon here. Okay, so you don't actually have to write vbind, which is really cool. So like when there's an event, say input, so you can have, remember it was v on, oops, if I could type, v on click, and we changed that to @ that's an event. Well, for a binding an attribute like disabled, you have vbind disabled. You can just take away the vbind, and that'll actually work. So we'll just check that now that's working. Okay, we actually need some text on that button. So submit form. Okay. See, that's actually disabled now. That's still working because of that, even with that shorthand code. So it's always best if you can save a bit of time. It just it's just easier, I find, to use it like that. So that's just a shorthand for that, and don't forget the shorthand for events is click. So attributes, binding attributes, you can just drop off the vbind, and events you can just use an @ instead of vom. Okay, so we're getting pretty big here, but what we can do is, okay, from here we need to now add some validation. Okay, so what we want to do here is, for the text fields, we just want to make sure that they have data in them. Okay, so what we can do there is, let's make a method here called check has data. Okay, so all we want to do here, it's a simple function, and we just want to say we want to add a value into the function. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to call this one value. Okay, and we just want to check, we want to go return, let's not do that yet. So if value dot length is greater than 0, let's do that, return true. So that has data. Otherwise, return false. Okay, we put a semicolon there to match. Okay, so we're going to use this one now. We haven't shown this before. It's putting a parameter in the function. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that now. Okay, so we've got our form where we want it to be. Okay, and so what we're going to do now is we're going to use a computed value. Now, so we want a computed value. So we want to go check form valid. Okay, and we'll make that a function. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to say if first name, last name, and email address have data. So let's say if this, remember we need this, the first name, we actually want to make check has data. Let's make that a method call, and we need to give it a this because it's inside this instance. So this will return a true or false value. Okay, and we want to do this one and this one. So we're going to say last name and email. Okay, so if they have data in there, we want to return true. Okay, so that has data. Otherwise, we want to return false. Okay, so what we can actually do is we can use this, instead of having this button disabled boolean here, we can actually just use this computed value, because we're going to get a true or false the same. However, we're returning the check is the form valid, a true or false. So this is actually the opposite way. If it's true, the form this disabled will disable it. So we just want to have opposite. So we'll put a exclamation mark there, and because otherwise we would have to do it this way, false and true. Because if it's all valid, we don't want it to be disabled. But actually, because with the way we've named it check form valid, we actually want it to make it make sense. The form is valid, it's true, so we want it to have true. So we just need to have it just to say that disable it when this is not true. Okay, so that's what we're doing there. Okay, so let's have a look in the browser and see where we're at. So we haven't got any data in there now. Okay, so let's see here. Does this change now? So if we got data in all three of those, and now if we put data in email, okay, so we get it, that button comes alive now again. Okay, so that's basically what we want. Alright, so let's do the next one. We want to have we want to also add in here, we want to say that and this dot gender. Okay, so that will that will just say, that'll just check for a value, because now there's no value. So either of those if we look at here, male and female, either of those values, male or female, will trigger that this dot gender. So we're okay just leaving it like that, but we'll just check it just to make sure we're going the right way. Okay, so let's move those through those. Okay, we're not working, but if we either of those will work now. Okay, so we want to have newsletter as well. Okay, so let's just add and this dot newsletter. Okay, let's make sure that's working, and that doesn't have a value. So what we have to do here, I've got that right. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so what we've done now is we want to do it for newsletter now, and so if we check here that newsletter should be the same as here, so I've just put this dot newsletter here, and that should work the same. So if we have a look here, okay, we need to choose a newsletter. Okay, so now that doesn't work until we've got all of those. So the next one we want to do is just I agree, and okay, so we want to say and this dot I agree equals true. We have to be careful with this one because we want it to equal true there. So we'll just make that a false. Okay, so if we check that, okay, that's working. So it needed to be a Boolean value. Okay, so we want to set, so now we're checking when we tick that box, that actually gives us a Boolean value. And so we needed to make sure that that's a Boolean value. So we set the default as false, not checked. If we set that to true when we start, that'll give us that'll be checked when we load the page. Okay, so we want it to start as false. We want the user to agree to that. And the next one is just check has data here for and this dot message. Okay, so now we have some basic validation here. Okay, so we can't submit the form until that. Okay, so we've got our validation working now. That's everything there. So we can't submit it until everything's filled in. So this video is getting quite long, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this up here, and we're going to add some cool CSS styles in the next video to this validation. Okay, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. And don't forget the code will be down below, will be linked down below. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to let me know. Thank you very much.